Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. It's Suzanne. Welcome to The Courage Effect. Our topic today is something that is near and dear to my heart. I think it is probably to all of our hearts, but I don't know how much we really talk about it. The topic is joy. Joy is something that we all really seek in our lives, and it can take courage to bring joy because there are so many things that we're wrangling on a day-to-day basis, and it's really easy to deprioritize. So, how do we actually bring more joy into our lives? And my guest today is somebody who proudly claims that joy is her job, which is also her overall approach to life. So, let's hear from Lisa Even. Lisa is a speaker, coach, author, and joy connoisseur. Whether it's through coaching, her podcast called Have Good Ripple Effect, her book, Joy is My Job, or her speaking and training, Lisa helps challenge people to think beyond their backyards and realize that they happen to the world, not the other way around. She brings authentic connection, energy, real life experiences, stories, and strategies to any room while inspiring audiences to dream bigger and create bigger and better ripple effects. Lisa, it is a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to The Courage Effect.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I think these topics are perfect, so I'm excited to be here.
Well, and I love that you said that because there's so much, for me, so much similarity between courage and joy. I don't think it's an association that people necessarily automatically think about. But I'd love to kick off this conversation with, in your book, you basically say that you are making a case for joy. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think it certainly started with my husband and I making a case for joy in our lives and saying, well, if we wait for joy to find us, we're going to wait forever. But I think there's also this idea, especially in our work lives, that we think, well, once we get through Q2 or once we meet this metric, like then things will calm down and we'll have joy. And I just kind of call like, I don't know. I don't think that there's going to be a perfect moment for it. And so I feel like I'm out there kind of being like, do you want more joy? You could have it. It's a choice, right? Like those are the things that when I think about making the case for joy, I'm always kind of looking around thinking like, who could use a little bit more? And maybe just a switch of a mindset, almost like you'd switch hats. Yeah. Gosh, there's so much there, isn't there?
So much there, and the whole idea of deferring it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, oh, when this happens, then everything's going to be fantastic. We do that with so many things in life, and I think we definitely do that with joy. And I hate to admit that I do that too.
We all do. Here and there, even I catch myself, I'm like, wait. Yeah.
So, can you actually define joy for us? Because I think that there's a difference with happiness, and I'd love to hear how you actually define the word.
Yeah, and I think my definition will probably be unsatisfying to a lot of people in the sense that I'm like, it's actually yours to choose. But the things that I look for are, do you feel more alive? And are you creating things that bring you happiness and fun and a little bit of energy? If it's certainly kind of taking things away versus adding to, that's how I know that maybe I need to switch my joy because sometimes even it's like I go through a busy period of life and I'm like, oh, I should quiet down. Like I need a little, my joy now is going to come from rest. But other times it's like, oh, we need to jazz this up a bit. So that's how I would define it. I'd be curious. Okay, what about you? Like, how do you think about joy?
I love that you defined it that way because I would say the same thing. I think it evolves just
Hmm.
like I evolve, right? I mean, where am I in life right now? What do I need most? And that was actually one of the things that I loved when I got my coaching certification was that, the whole life balance wheel. Have you ever done the life
Yeah, I
balance
have.
wheel?
I
Yeah.
have.
But the idea of, you have certain things in your, like you have your family, you have your community, you have your job, you have maybe your spirituality, you have your health and your fitness. And all of these things are really important, but some things get more attention than others depending on where you are in your life. And you need to feed it depending on what's happening. And when something comes more to the forefront, something might go actually more into the background. But I like the idea of getting an idea, getting a better handle on where I am now
Yeah.
and how can what does joy mean right now? Because I think you're completely right. It doesn't mean the same thing that it necessarily has in the past.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
So talk to me about the case for joy. So, I mean, I know you talk about life being tough and there really no being
Mhm.
do-overs and us really needing to take advantage of, every minute that we have, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about putting the case up.
Yeah, when I think about some of those moments, I tell a story in the book about how I lost a cousin really young, and I was 18 and she was 22. She passed away unexpectedly, had a young daughter, 6 month old at the time, and we never really got closure on like what happened to her. They think it was like a heart arrhythmia or something. So we never really got closure. And I remember for the longest period of time waking up and thinking, I got another one, like I got another day. And I remember it being almost like a little bit of panic, but also a little bit of like, don't waste it. And I never wish that on anyone, right? I never wish like a hard and scary thing. But I think what it did for me is it really lasered in this idea that you only get so much time and you get a choice. And I think those are the biggest things in terms of number one, realizing almost the urgency of it, because oftentimes like we said, you put it off until retirement and then you think like, oh, now I'll have joy. I actually do some retirement joy and retirement sessions with some wealth management firms, and I had a gentleman walk over and say, so you're telling me I worked all those years? And I kind of looked at him like, yeah, yeah, you did. And he goes, so now I got to make joy my job just like I did in my job. And I'm like, yeah. And a little part of me wants to be like, and anybody younger than that, like you should do it too, because I certainly think there's an element of choice first. That's the biggest thing. Like, do you want it? And if the answer is yes, like I am all yours for ideas and inspiration, things like that. But if you don't have that part, we don't go any further.
Mm. So who are the people that don't say yes?
You'd be surprised. I feel like you look around your personal lives and you can kind of be like, "Yep, I got one. I got one." But I was doing a session with a large group. It was kind of like a keynote slash workshop. And actually, a woman raised her hand and said, "What if I don't want more?" And I looked at her and I thought, yeah, because it was so rich of her to say that of
Mm.
what if I've either got enough or I don't want it? And I said to her, I said, you're exactly where you need to be then. Like if you choose it and you want more tomorrow, let's do it. But if you don't, that's okay. That's okay too. I think sometimes people think like you have to force it. And I'm like, nope, you don't have to force it. You just get to know that the choice is there 24/7.
Mm. Yes, it really is that mindset and that choice.
Hmm.
It also makes me think about, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation over the past few years about toxic positivity. How do you not fall into that? Because I can see people pretty
Oh,
quickly
yeah.
judging you, I would assume.
Oh, it's so funny because I tend to have a lot of energy. I often will say, like, I drink a lot of coffee and I'm always like this, right? Like, I have to warn them, like, hi, I'm a higher energy soul. But I often say, a lot of times in my sessions, that joy is actually a really hard topic to stand in front of people and talk about. Because the minute you start talking about it, someone in the room isn't there yet, right? Like they're having something in their life, a circumstance, or just something that's not going to be like the brightest. This morning, I laugh, I had a flat tire on my van.
Mm.
And so I had to scooter. Borrowed my daughter's scooter to go to workout class. And I was laughing. I'm like, this is not joyful. And, then I'm coordinating like who can take me to the tire place. My husband's, often doing a 12-hour shift. And I think, yeah, there are moments when it's not for you. And so that's where I go with that is really just knowing that we're going to talk about the good stuff, but we're also going to hit on the like, how do you get out of the crappy to happy type of place? Because I do actually talk to people about how do you take the crappy and maybe infuse just a little bit of happy. Much like salt, you wouldn't put the whole bottle, you'd sprinkle it on so that it's just right.
That's so interesting. And I like that response a lot because I feel like that's one of the things people, I mean, we know that we tend to have polarity thinking, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's black or white or it's this or that. Like we don't really live in that both and. So, and the idea of what you're saying is that joy is yours to choose.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that you gloss over the bad stuff. It means that maybe you even recognize it and
Mhm.
see how you can maybe leverage it or season it.
Yeah, just a little bit. And oftentimes I always say, like, start really small. Like the barriers that I talk about in the book are like money and time and creativity. And I'm like, we have very little time. So let's create a little tiny piece of joy with very little time. And so I talk about in the like 5, 10, and 15-minute increments is really a smart place to start. Because we're not going to wait for the huge vacation. Okay, we get that once a year, but we're also going to just do it in bite sizes.
Yep. So it really is a mindset. It really is getting
It
into
is.
that
Yeah.
space and having the courage to prioritize it in your life for you, if you have the room for it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think part of it is that I always say pair it with something you're already doing, like meals or, like activities that you already have built in your life. So it doesn't feel like one more thing. We tend to put joy like before, during, or after in like 5, 10 minute chunks. And I always say then it doesn't feel so heavy. You're not lugging it around. You're just adding a little bit here and there.
It makes me think of like rewards based
Yeah, it is.
systems, right? Where it's like, okay, when I do, to your point too about deferred joy, when I do this, then I get this reward.
Like boom. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break in a minute. I'd love to come back in the second half of the show and get maybe a little bit more of the tactics because you're talking about these practices. I think it would be great for you to share some of those. But before we go, give me a quick capture on joy comes from the hard stuff.
Yeah, joy comes from the hard stuff in the sense that oftentimes I would say like peaks and valleys, you're going to get a lot of like tough stuff. And so
Mm.
we're going to look for like, how do we, I would say, lean on or look forward to joy? Meaning we've had some really great memories that we're really relying on, like, oh, do you remember that was so fun? Or we're going to start to look ahead and think, let's put some joy here because we know we're coming up on a really tough season of life and we're going to need it. It's almost like leaning on it for a little bit of like oomph to get you through. And I think that hard stuff is really where you need it. Because oftentimes we think, oh, I can't have it now. I'm like, no, no, you need it now. Like now is the time if you're stressed and burnt out and frustrated. It's now.
I also really like that because we're going through so much change and so, like all the
Mhm.
crises and all the various things that happen in life. So it really allows us to hopefully stop some of the broader swirl and anchor
Yeah,
on the now.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's cut to a quick break and we will be right back. You're listening to The Courage Effect. Stay tuned. Courage takes on many forms. I know from personal experience that one of the most courageous things we can do is to recognize when we need help and seek out support. If you're going through a hard time, feeling like something is interfering with your happiness or the ability to achieve your goals, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. It's an online platform where you can be matched with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. For more information and to get matched with a therapist, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/courage. Visiting this link both supports this show and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and I am in conversation with Lisa Even. So, Lisa, as a joy connoisseur, part of what you talked about in the first half of the show was what gets in the way of us really being able to experience joy. So, what are those barriers? I'd love to hear you give your info on that.
Yeah, absolutely. In the book, I give 5 or 6, but I think there's more than that. So if you're listening and like, these may be what you're experiencing, but there might be other things that you're telling yourself as well. I know for my husband and I, we were saying, oh, well, we're too busy. We're too tired. We had little kids, so we can't really have any joy. Like, we can't have joy until they sleep through the night or they're in school. The list went on and on. And I just started writing down the things that I kept kind of like giving the excuse for not making joy a priority. Oh, we're not creative. oh, money's a challenge because, our daycare is like a mortgage. It was just all those things that I caught myself like being like, well, I can't have it. And I think that that's like one of the first steps is to say, like, okay, number one, do you want more joy? And number two, what are you finding like the barriers to be? And oftentimes it's the justification that we just need to like remove it and or even say, like, well, I can be tired and joyful, like, I'm still awake for a period of time. Or, for us, even like joy and money, sometimes it's like, oh, well, I could take my dinner that could sit on the table and I could take it to the backyard and have a picnic. Like, that didn't cost any more money. It's just some of those things where, we almost put a halt to it and then it's like, oh, can't have it. And I'm like, no, no, you can have joy and be the thing. There's a knack to it, I think.
I'm hearing intention.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just almost reframing it of giving yourself permission to be both because so many people think you can only be one or the other. And I'm like, "Oh, no, no. Like you can be both. It just might feel odd the first time you do it." There are some nights when it's
Yeah.
like we're having joy, but I'm exhausted and I'm like, "Well, it's just the 10 minutes that I'm choosing to use before I go to bed." Like, yeah, you can be both.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about just how we letting life happen to us. I mean, which is exactly what you have in your bio, right? I mean, it's so true. The idea of like waiting for it to happen or waiting for somebody else to do it as opposed to getting in the driver's seat and doing it ourselves.
Yeah. And, I even laugh, like, sometimes, if you're a little cranky, you're like you can almost be, like, half cranky and half joyful. Sometimes the most funny moments are when my husband and I are just joking around and it's like, "I'm tired," and but it's like, we're gonna be a little bit joyful in this moment of just kind of laughing at life." Like, that even in itself is a little bit of joy to be like, "Yeah, that happened." Mhm.
Yeah. How do you recommend this work in for people that maybe, are in underprivileged or underserved communities? What are the things that you can do for them? I mean, when people are basically born into
Yeah.
circumstances that are really compromised or just not a lot of joy. So I'm curious, how do you we talked about
Yep.
toxic positivity a little bit in the beginning. I'm just curious, how do you balance those?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things that, and maybe I'll like divert and then come back over to that. So when my husband and I decided to make joy our job, the first order of business was to create a list. And what we did is I literally went to Home Depot, bought a whiteboard and put it in our bedroom. I was like, "Can you hang this right next to our bed?" He's like, "People don't have whiteboards in their bedroom." And I'm like, "Well, we do." And the idea is that I wanted to brainstorm joy before we fell asleep because that's the only time we're together. And then I wanted to add to that in the morning when I'm the most fresh. And I think about whether it's a community in need or somewhere else, the first thing I say is like, what's on the list? Maybe it's going on a walk. Maybe it's, talking with a friend. Maybe it's instead of eating, my sack lunch by myself, I find someone to do it with. But having a go list of joy activities, things that bring you joy, is the first order of business. And when it comes to free joy, I always say whenever my kids are bored, you're going to get an idea soon because your brain is searching for it. And so as you start to think about whether it's a book from the library or, just being, I always say like being outside is the easiest one if you have no money because everybody hopefully has access to outside. Like go lay in the grass. Like there are so many moments. And then I think from a standpoint of building in some of those other activities, whether it's like riding a bike or what have you, you can slowly build on that. One of my favorite joy things is to mix up our meals. And so when we
Mhm.
were, newlyweds, we didn't have a lot of money. So we did ramen noodles. And then one night we would do ramen noodles with the salt packet, and the next night ramen noodles with Prego. And so it's like, how many ways can you make the cheapest meal out there? So there's certainly ways to do it. It just takes a little bit of like thought. And I think that's where you start is, okay, I know I want joy. If I could make a list of three things, what would I do? And that's how it like starts to snowball.
It makes me think of experimentation too, just
Yeah.
being open to maybe what you can discover if you're trying new things.
Yes, absolutely. My favorite quote, or one of them is live in the lab. And so I imagine myself with like goggles and a beaker being like, we're going to have some joy. My kids, they laugh. Sometimes it's a hot mess. And other times I'm like, that actually worked. Like, we did it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about your book. You talk about actually having a fire in your home at a point,
Yeah.
which was really hard for you. Talk a little bbit about that experience and how that influenced you.
Yeah, we had a house fire due to lightning. So lightning struck our home in the middle of the night. Thankfully, we got out before because it was just so loud and our electricity wasn't working quite right. So we immediately put our kiddos into the van. And then the fire crew arrived and it was like, "Woo, look at that." So I ended up driving away, like, so my kids wouldn't remember it.
Mm,
And my husband stayed with the house. And then I had one relative. We were living in a town with where one of my relatives lives. So I took the kids over to her house. And then that next morning, I went back over to the house to see like what it looked like. And I remember my husband and I had made a very clear moment of like, we don't live here anymore. And, it took us a bunch of months to get our stuff back from being some of it got to go get cleaned, other stuff got thrown in the dumpster. So we ended up if you would have asked my kids if they like to go camping around that time, they would have been like, "Yeah." You just wouldn't have known it was apartment camping. We rented a couple of beds and a couch, and then we essentially lived with nothing for 4 months, and we had some of the most fun that we have ever had. You can bowl with empty water bottles and like a little ball in the middle of a living room with no furniture. We were doing things that we almost just had freedom in the fact that there was nothing else to do but create a little bit of joy.
yeah, I love it. The camping lab.
Yeah, exactly. It really was. And sometimes, my kids we had painter's tape all over the floor and they were hopping from place to place. And I'm like, oh, that's a new one. Okay. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, you get a little bit more creative when you have to or when you want to.
yeah, so bringing in some of that sense of experimentation and play even sounds like that's
Yeah.
also a nice way of doing it. So talk to us a little bit some of the techniques that you recommend for bringing more joy into our lives.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to give 3 joy challenges. And these are things that I'm basically going to give you a topic, and then your homework is to go out and do them. And they're going to look different for each person because everybody's joy, right, is unique to them. But the first joy challenge I want you to give you is when I was when I was and what I mean by that is you're going to add the word to the end of that sentence. When I was a little girl, my dad loved to listen to records. I would love to get back. Like, I am going to pull out that old record player and listen. Or, like, when I was a newlywed, we would go to the Dollar Burger place on Tuesday nights. We should go there again. It's like fill in the blank of something that you've done in the past. Maybe it was when you were in your 20s or your 30s or even your 50s, but look back and find something that you haven't done in a while and do it again. Sometimes just creating a new memory is like, oh, that felt good. So that's joy challenge number one. The second one is a 1 hour challenge. You're going to look at your calendar over the next couple weeks to a month and you're going to find 1 hour and you're going to say to yourself, I want to put joy here. Because sometimes if we don't schedule it, it won't happen. We just keep like pushing it further and further away. Now, if you're like me, you're going to be like, Lisa, I don't have an hour to give. Who has an hour? Right? Like I'm busy with kids and I say, okay, 20 minutes. You got 20 minutes, right? Like you can narrow that time frame. My husband and I, we go on date night, usually Wednesday afternoons from 3 to 4. Because we don't have a night to actually go on date night. Like, who has time? Right. Like, so
Yeah.
we literally, like, our kids get home from school, we give them a snack, and then we say, okay, kids, we're going to be back in 1 hour. We usually drive to the coffee shop, get a cup of coffee, drive home, and drink it. And then we're like, we're back. Right? So we're like getting jet fuel, we're having a date, and we're back in 1 hour. Now, the third one is crappy to happy. I want you to look at the unglamorous things in your life, whether it's laundry or dishes, Excel spreadsheets, work projects, home projects, and I want you to infuse a little happy into that crappy. I always say to my kids, we're going to find a little way to make it fun, whether it's listening to music or even like I hate matching socks. My husband loves it. I hate it. I'm like, kids, we're calling this a sock party. So get creative with some of those things. And I always say, just find 5 minutes before, during, or after to really find a little happy around the crappy.
Mm. All right. When I was a dot, dot, dot,
Mhm. Yep.
scheduling joy.
1 hour challenge or 20 minutes.
Yep. Crappy to happy.
Yeah.
I love it. They're all very tactical. So, and
Yeah.
I like how practical they are too. So, and again, it really takes me back to the idea of just being really intentional with your joy. So, and not just waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, and you can be a little messy. Like, I remember we went to a movie and my kids were so naughty and we left early and I was like, "This didn't get to count. It wasn't joy. Like, it was no fun." And I just laughed. My husband, like, we were out in the parking lot discussing it and our kids are running around, like, chasing each other, like, in the little grassy area. And he looks over and he goes, "Mission accomplished. I think they're having some joy." So your joy is gonna look a little bit different than maybe what you set out to do, but that's okay. Life is messy and so is joy.
I love that. Life is messy and so is joy. And for some people, messy is really hard. So it's like, how do
Yeah.
they embrace the mess?
Yeah. Small doses, little tiny bites.
There you go. One of the things that you have in your book is joy is your legacy for yourself and others. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think we sometimes forget that we are the permission givers to the people around us. And I think about what I want people to remember me by. And I always say it's ripple effect and it's joy. Like, I always really want to make a difference. And I always want to be like striving towards making life fun. And I think about when you do the work part and you're like, I was so good at my job and I got a lot done. I often will say, but did you also make time for joy? Because you're the permission givers to your kids and your friends and your coworkers. Like, there's a legacy component to it. And so when I think about that, that's what I hope people say is like she worked hard and she played hard.
Mm, nice.
Yeah.
And okay, so have good ripple effect. Obviously, that's the name of your show, and I mean, your company as well. So,
Yes. Yeah.
how do you know if you're having good ripple effect?
Ooh, I always say it's, when you throw a stone in the water and it ripples out to everyone, right? Like, you are a disturbance in your lives, right? Like, you are the rock. When you go into a room or into a meeting or, any interaction that you have a choice to either disturb it in a good way or to disturb it in a not so good way. So I'm often thinking like, is my disturbance good? And I start with like those mini moments of the moments with my coworkers or my family. And then I'm always looking for like the bigger ones too. But that's really where I see ripple effect being the the shining component is in your everyday world. Are you disturbing things for good? And if not, maybe you could change that. I just like you should choose the other way.
Yeah. Well, how are you asking for feedback from other people to know that it is good ripple effect?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever been asked it in that way. I often get really curious when I'm in conversation around what are people thinking and what are they feeling. And so I think those questions, I don't know that I've ever really like said like Was that good?" But I just often like try to get to know like what I would say like try on their glasses and see what they see. And so I'm always on the hunt for like what are the things that maybe they like or they've experienced and how can I be a helper to it? Whether it's just I know that they love, this type of coffee and I'm like, "Hey, I got you this type of coffee," or just even a conversation of knowing that their kid plays soccer and being like, "How is your kid doing? Like, how are we?" So that it feels like I'm there with them and I've tried on a different perspective, maybe the one that they carry.
Mm. I'm curious, how do you integrate that into your work, right? Because it's the idea of
Yeah.
like, when like self-awareness and somebody coming to us with what works for them.
Mhm.
How do you do that? Once you get feedback from somebody, how do you evolve?
Ooh, that is so good. I think I evolve in the doing. Like, unfortunately, I wish I could say, like, I sit down and I think it through and I do these perfect moments, but I'm like, oh, actually, no. Like, a lot of my evolution comes from trying something new or even, trying whether I have a list of like questions that I love to ask people. And I'm like, oh, I should try a new question and find out a little bit from them. I think that's how I evolve. And I also think like we talked earlier in the podcast about living in the lab. I mean, that's truly how I approach all the projects that I do, all the conversations that I have, I don't know, I do some sessions around networking and I'm always like, here's how you do it. Right. And if you get that human that's like not giving you anything, I'm always like, be a really great question asker. What's on their horizon? Where are they dreaming to? What are their heartburns, right? The things that are making them feel maybe a little challenge in their life, and how can you be helpful to it? And I think those are the same things that I then incorporate in my world.
Well, and it makes me just think a lot about too with courage, same thing, right? I mean, a lot of the
Yeah.
time you don't know until you try it, but then you also have to you have to get experience from other people too and know
Yeah,
that it's not just about you.
exactly.
But what I'm
Um,
hearing too is the idea of like maybe the like yourself as the lab.
it really is because I think that the more that you can explore and understand the people around you, like the more helpful you become to that interaction. And I think that's where that ripple effect and that's where you can start to infuse some joy into those moments as well is, just kind of that curiosity. And like you said, the courage to be able to be like, okay, instead of like steering away from this, what if I actually steered closer? And we tried some new things and yeah, sometimes you don't get it right, but sometimes you do, and it feels good.
I dig it. A few things that I heard you say as we wrap up. So, first and foremost, joy is yours to choose. So, it's not just
Mhm.
about finding time for it, but how it incarnates is up to you. And that might change over the course of time. And bringing joy challenges into our lives. How do we actually do this in a way where we're not waiting for it to happen? We're being intentional
Mhm.
and even potentially scheduling joy and accepting that joy is also in the hard stuff. So it can be about it, and it takes courage to actually do it, to prioritize it in your life and to make sure that you're stepping into it. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you for your positivity and for your energy. And thank you for being on the show. I'll make sure that all of your contact information is in the show notes. Any final thoughts as we depart?
Ooh, I always just leave with get out there and make joy your job.
There you go, from somebody who does that every day. All right, Lisa, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, everybody. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. We partner with individuals, teams, and organizations to enhance leadership, increase agility, and build effective teams. More information about us is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. Rate and review your favorite episodes on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Share with your colleagues, family, and anyone in your universe who might be inspired by a good dose of courage. If you have feedback or stories to share about the show or would like to apply to be a guest, please contact us via our website. Benny Mathers is our producer. Dave Nelson composed our theme music. Alex Sandyforth is our administrative maven, and I'm your host, Suzanne Weller.